Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. It has been a weekend filled with so much news, and we have only a few minutes to discuss it. Let me begin with statements by Donald Trump this weekend. He accused Kamala Harris of being deranged and unhinged and called for her impeachment. There is a fascinating thing taking place in this American political drama. Donald Trump's words are appalling. Kamala Harris is not unhinged, and she is not deranged. And as for being impeached, there are no grounds for impeachment of Kamala Harris. And when he calls for her indictment, which he has also done, there are no grounds for that either. But don't confuse Donald Trump with the facts. What I think is clear, and this is what must be conveyed to undecided voters, is that the person who is not fit to be president is Donald J. Trump. I've been in politics a long time. I've watched a lot of excessive rhetoric, hyperbolic rhetoric used in campaigns. But the kind of language that Donald Trump is using is so appalling that we need to address it. He needs to be called on it. And Republicans need to stand up and just say no. You want to support Donald Trump's positions on issues, fine. But this kind of rhetoric is destructive and frankly hurts the democratic process. Donald Trump also said something this weekend that bothered me profoundly. He talked about mass deportations. Now, this is not the first time he's done it. It was done during the Republican National Convention. But the fact that Donald Trump could be president of the United States and is talking about mass deportations of people, millions of people who are in this country legally, and some of whom are awaiting processing, is beyond my comprehension. Where is the outrage? Where are Republicans who will stand up and say, this kind of language is just plain wrong? Now, while all of this is going on, you would think that Donald Trump would be addressing conditions in the world. And now I want to turn to what is going on in the world, because foreign policy should be front and center in this campaign, not hyperbolic rhetoric. Let's talk about the Middle East. The Israelis accomplished a remarkable feat. They took out Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, and they did it by also taking out virtually the entire leadership of Hezbollah. Now, why? Why did they do it? Because some 80,000 Israelis who live in the north of the country have been forced to flee. And as we approach the anniversary of October 7th, let's remember that those rockets started flying as Hamas terror was revealed in southern Israel. Let's also remember that on October 8th, the day after the horrific, unconscionable massacre, that Hezbollah started firing rockets into Israel. Now, let's be clear. 80,000 Israelis who live in the north of the country have had to flee their homes. Have you heard anybody say a word about it in the international community? No, of course not. And the Israelis have an obligation to defend their own country. Hezbollah has fired rockets repeatedly, thousands of rockets into Israel. And the Israelis, in a precise, carefully planned campaign that should be the envy of every intelligence agency, first knocked out their pagers, then their walkie-talkies, then proceeded to go after their leadership, and finally took out Nasrallah. I know war is brutal. Nobody said it was pleasant. But the Israelis have an obligation to protect themselves. I have listened to arguments by those who say what the Israelis have done is excessive. Let me remind you that if 80,000 Americans on the Canadian border or the Mexican border had been forced to leave their homes because of rockets, why, it would have been clear what the United States would do. There was another moment that was critical. Donald Trump met with Mr. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. But the interesting thing is, there was no firm commitment from Donald Trump to defend Ukraine. In stark contrast, Kamala Harris spoke eloquently about the need to protect Ukraine and to support the Ukrainian struggle against Russia. That, my friends, is leadership. Donald Trump's equivocations, back and forthing, and refusal to commit to help Ukraine, that is a disgrace. Interestingly enough, we know that Donald Trump, if he were to be elected president, would reduce aid to Ukraine. And we know that J.D. Vance, the nominee for vice president, is opposed to aid to Ukraine. I suggested last week, and I will suggest again, that those of Eastern European and Ukrainian descent who live in the Middle West should consider carefully what the future would augur if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance were put into office. These are serious times, and with the clock ticking down, we have to be clear about what the direction America will take is going to be. There is one other thing I have to say. Donald Trump continues to cast doubts on the legitimacy of the election. He says only if he wins is it a legitimate election, otherwise it was clearly rigged. I've never heard anything so absurd in my life. But that is Donald Trump, isn't it? Always making these kinds of statements. But the simple truth is, what we want to see is finality in the election. No matter who you're for, after the election we want to know who won, and we want the country to come together behind whoever is elected president. It doesn't mean you have to support the policies. It does mean that the democratic process is very much at stake. For the American people, the next few weeks will indicate what the future of our country will be. There is much to consider. I am John Rothman, and you are listening to Around the Political World, a political world in turmoil. So this episode is done, but not our commentary. We will be back tomorrow with more discussion about what is going on in the political world and preparation for what will be a vice presidential joint appearance. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. And of course, I appreciate hearing from you on LinkedIn and Facebook. Some of you email me directly. I'm delighted to have your comments. Most important of all, I want to thank Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this program, who makes sure each day that Around the Political World with John Rothman is up, running, and posted. I'll see you tomorrow, right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. Around the Political World with John Rothman is proud to introduce our first sponsor. That's right, we have someone who loves what we do, and I have to tell you, I love what she does. Be Bold America is produced by KSQD, and of course, the person who leads us through these great discussions is none other than Jill Cody. She's an author, a radio personality, and she does one heck of a job of putting into focus major issues, from protecting democracy to our climate. Let me tell you, the topics on the podcast are serious. It's not for the faint of heart, but that's to say, the show is for all of us. Be bold in America. In an election year, what can we do to increase discussion, debate, and the rest? I'll tell you what we can do. Listen to Jill Cody as she exposes all of us to the issues. You can tune in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you like to get your shows. So this is John Rothman, delighted, pleased, thrilled to endorse Jill Cody's wonderful program, Be Bold, America.